Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Simply Sports Talk. Today, we're going to be covering the Nets versus the Cavaliers. Now, the Nets coming into this game with the 8th seed. They're fighting for a playoff spot. This entire year, they've been dealing with injuries, Kyrie Irving, vaccine, him not being able to play, James Harden trade, Ben Simmons not being able to play. But coming into this game, the Nets are the 8th seed, but the Cavaliers were the 7th seed. The Cavaliers obviously want to defend their 7th seed. They don't want the Nets coming and taking their spot, as they've been working really hard to get to the playoffs. I heard from the announcers that they suffered a few injuries from their guards. I'm assuming Colin Sexton, but they are a young team trying to find their identity, but they're also trying to defend their playoff spot. So we have conflict. Now, the first thing I noticed was Evan Mobley's skill set. I was surprised seeing a 7-footer being able to dribble, pull up three like that. I was like, he has the skill set of a guard, but he is 7 foot. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Kevin Durant, but nothing like Kevin Durant, as Kevin Durant is much better than Evan Mobley right now. But I was really surprised with Evan Mobley and really impressed with his skill set. Pull up threes, creating shots for others, passing, dribbling. I was like, okay, he's basically playing like a guard. Not only was he playing like a guard, he was playing great on both sides of the ball. He played good defense. He got a few rebounds that I noticed, and he was scoring at will. Well, I won't say at will, but he was scoring with effective and efficiently. Now, the other thing I noticed was Darius Garland for the Cavaliers is the leader of this team. He's the leader. He's the guy that was averaging the most points since the All-Star break. They talked about it. He was averaging 25 since the All-Star break. But Darius Garland, not only since the All-Star break, has been great in this game, he asserted himself as the leader of the Cavaliers, and his goal was to not only have a great game, but to make sure his teammates also had a great game by facilitating. He had a few crazy passes this game. I saw it was a few crazy passes. He did a few impressive things. He did a circus layup, 2 difficult layups, and he did 2 crazy passes. Now, those passes weren't made, and they didn't make the shot, but they were still crazy passes nevertheless. The next thing I noticed was he was scoring in the mid-range. He was scoring at 3. He was driving to the hole. I was like, this Darius Garland can score at all 3 levels of the game, facilitate. The only thing he really lacks is defense. Besides defense, he scores at will. And that's kind of the guards today. They typically don't have the greatest defense. I'm talking John Moran and those guys, but they're offensively gifted. They can score at any level of the game. I'm talking threes, mid-range, pull-ups. They can drive to the hole, get any shot they want. Now, as the first quarter started, Kevin Durant was Kevin Durant. KD was KD. Kevin Durant was getting any shot he wanted in the first quarter. Pull-up mid-ranges, contested mid-ranges, pull-up threes. He was driving to the hole, passing, facilitating. Kevin Durant was Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant did what he wanted to do. It simply looked too easy. Sometimes it looked too easy, as he had 16 points in the first half. He had 16 points in the first quarter. But we have to admit, Kevin Durant struggled in the second quarter. He couldn't get a shot. The Nets in general couldn't get anything to fall in the second quarter. Kevin Durant wasn't helping either. He was missing shots. Nothing seemed to click during the second quarter. Now, the Nets going into the second quarter had a big lead on the Cavaliers, but the Cavaliers started crawling back and clawing back slowly. They were chipping at the lead. But I noticed during the second quarter, the Nets had a scoring drought. They had 4 minutes where they couldn't score a single basket, but throughout the entire game, they just had these scoring bursts where they would just go for 10 or 12-0 runs. They just locked in defensively, locked in offensively, and they couldn't be stopped. But they did also have scoring droughts where they couldn't get a single bucket to go in, and they couldn't stop the Cavaliers from scoring. Now, Kyrie Irving in the first half was all right. He hit a few shots. You know, he got a few drives to the hole, but overall for this game, Kyrie Irving was ineffective. Kyrie Irving couldn't get nothing to fall. He was missing threes. He had a bad turnover that turned into a Lauri Markkanen slam home. But Kyrie Irving wasn't really effective in the first half or second half, to be honest. He had a pretty bad first half, he had a solid first half, but he had a really bad second half. It just was not clicking for Kyrie Irving. Now, speaking of the role players, Bruce Brown was an effective role player in the first quarter. He scored 9 points alone in the first quarter. He was really effective in helping the Nets build up their lead, as in the beginning they had a big lead in the first, and he was part of that lead. He was instrumental in that lead. Caris LeVert for the Cavaliers, he was pretty good. He was getting a few buckets. He was trying to, as they got down significantly, he was trying to help the team get back into the game, and he got to the line a few times. He drove to the hole a few times. He hit a few shots. I was noticing Caris LeVert was a really good player for the Cavaliers. Another good player was Kevin Love. He was getting a few rebounds, passing, He, he has his signature throw it all the way down the court pass. He did that this game. Like, Kevin Love in the first half was pretty effective. He had a 3. I'm pretty sure he had a few layups. I remember he had a layup over Kevin Durant. Kevin Love was an effective player in this game. Now, as I mentioned, the Cavaliers going into the second quarter were significantly down, but the Nets, they struggled. They struggled in the second quarter mightily. They couldn't get anything to fall. That led to the Nets now having I think it was 17-point lead, and then it was like a 3-point lead going into the second half. Or it was something similar to that. It was really close going into the second half. Had me thinking the Nets were just going to blow them out. Like, this wouldn't be fair. But Darius Garland and the team, they gathered up the troops, and they was able to stop the Nets from scoring, and they was able to get a few buckets. Now, going into the second half, Kevin Durant had 22, and Darius Garland had 16. In the second half, I noticed off the bat, Lauri Markkanen was solid. As I mentioned, he had a slam home, and he dunked the ball on the fast break. But he hit a few threes, he hit a few shots. He was playing good basketball. I noticed that. For the Nets, Drummond was doing pretty good. He got a few offensive rebounds that were pivotal. I saw the disparity in the second chance points, which is a direct cause of offensive rebounds. The Nets had 19, the Cavaliers had 4, and Drummond could be a direct link to that, as he's really good at offensive rebounding. And it really helped with them in the long run. 19-4 on second chance points is pivotal in the game. Now, to start the second half, not much was going on, but Darius Garland was active. Darius Garland was I saw him hit a few crazy layups, as I said earlier, finding his spots, getting his shots. Darius Garland was at a point during this game unstoppable. Nobody could stay in front of him and stop him from getting his shots. He was essentially taking over the game. And as I mentioned earlier, Kyrie Irving was struggling mightily in the second half with them being down. Kyrie Irving didn't step up. He kind of stepped down. And I was surprised, as Kyrie Irving is one of the best scorers in the league, but he just didn't have his shot tonight. Now, Kevin Durant was Kevin Durant, as during the third quarter, the Cavaliers were up, but Kevin Durant and the Nets were able to fight back. They were able to fight the Cavs off, and they went on a scoring burst, and they was just able to take over the game. And after they had that scoring burst, they just didn't look back. After they took over the lead in the fourth quarter, and after they took the lead, they just didn't look back. What I noticed with the Nets is they're a really dynamic team that can have scoring bursts of 10, 12, 15, 17-0 or 17-4 runs. But I noticed they struggle in moments where they can't score. They can't stop the other team from scoring, and they can't seem to get a bucket. I noticed 2 times during this game they had scoring drops. Now, I noticed with the Cavaliers, they didn't really have scoring drops. They never had like a legit I can't score drought. Well, in the first quarter, they did have somewhat of a scoring drought. They couldn't score as the Nets were reeling off 17 points. But the Cavaliers, I noticed, were really consistent with their comeback. They consistently chipped away slowly at the Nets, and they were just able to overtake them eventually. But the Nets were down big, and then they just went on a scoring run. And I noticed the Cavaliers don't have that guy who can just, like a Kevin Durant, who can just lead the team back and just have a scoring run. I believe the Cavaliers are a young, good team. They have potential, but they need superstars. Now, Evan Mobley and Darius Garland have potential, but we'll have to see how they develop as the years go by. But I do believe this was a really good game. This is a really good game. As you saw, a young team and an established team fighting to stay in the playoff. It was a very competitive game up until the end. As I mentioned, the Nets, they took the lead and didn't look back. But it was still a really competitive game going into the fourth quarter. Now, overall, as I mentioned earlier, the role players were pretty pivotal. I'm talking Bruce Brown, Lauri Markkanen, Kevin Love, Karis LeVert. They were all pivotal to the game. But as you saw, the superstars won this game. Darius Garland might have put up, I think he had 30, but Kevin Durant also had 30. And then the other players around Kevin Durant were just hitting their shots, such as Seth Curry, such as Bruce Brown, such as Andre Drummond. These all were pivotal to their win. Now, thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. This is Simply Sports Talk signing out.